Welcome to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really happy to tell you that I have Kjirstin Breure, who's the president and CEO and now the board chairperson at Hydrograph Clean Power. Also joining me as co-host is Bob Moriarty of 321 Gold fame. Before I say hello to both of them, let me just say that Hydrograph Clean Power trades in Canada under the symbol HG. You can buy it down here in the States, as I have, under the symbol HGRAF. It's trading at around 16 cents in U.S. money today. 266 million shares outstanding gives it a market cap of around 43 million in U.S. funds. So it's a real baby story. It's a real baby company. It's one that I'm most excited about, which is why I'm really happy to welcome Kjirstin Breure with us. Thank you, Kjirstin, for joining us, and Bob as well. Thanks, both of you. Bob is joining us from the south of France, and he tells me it's extremely hot out there, and so we're hoping he can keep us cool. That's maybe asking a lot of Bob, those of you who know Bob. But in any event, thank you, both of you, for joining me. Kjirstin, you know, for the sake of people that maybe haven't seen or not familiar with Hydrograph, I hope we reach out to some of those people today. Those who know the story might, it's not as important to them, but if you could just give us sort of an overview of Hydrograph Clean Power.
Sure. So Hydrograph Clean Power is a graphene production company. Graphene is a nanomaterial. It is also the strongest and most conductive material that's ever been discovered. It was discovered in 2004 at the University of Manchester with the now infamous Scotch tape method, where researchers literally put a piece of Scotch tape on graphite and eventually isolated one atomic layer. So if you imagine graphite, it's billions and billions of layers of graphene. So of course, most companies are starting with graphite as a feedstock and mechanically or chemically exfoliating it to really get down to that one atomic layer. Hydrograph is not one of those companies. We're completely synthetic. So really what we do is very differentiated and fully patented. We pump acetylene and oxygen into a steel chamber. We have electrodes inside that fire in synchrony, and it basically destabilizes the molecules, creating a bomb. So if you can imagine kind of a bomb going off and a cloud of smoke starting to crystallize, that's basically what we're doing. We are taking then the graphene that results from that explosion, and then our byproduct is syngas, because the oxygen and hydrogen have to go somewhere. So if you imagine the whole system, basically no energy required, it's exothermic, and there's no waste. So it's a beautifully simple system, and it actually generates the highest performing graphene provably in the industry, which we're very, very excited about, at a low capex model as well.
So low energy cost, I gather, is a big advantage, and one that those that have to use the Scotch tape method are not going to have low energy, or whatever method they're using. There's going to be energy involved to pry loose that one atom thick of carbon that is that we're talking about. All right, so can you give us talk a little bit more about graphene and some of its properties? What makes it so special? I mean, you compared it to some of the major breakthroughs in material sciences through the history of man. I mean, that's quite a statement. Mm-hmm. What can you tell us about graphene that makes it so special?
It's basically the versatility. So, you know, most of the natural world is comprised at some level of carbon. So carbon is really naturally abundant in our universe. Mm-hmm. And graphene, being comprised of carbon and further being a nanomaterial, it makes it very compatible with a lot of other systems. So you can use it internally in drug delivery systems. You can put it in carbon fiber, concrete, biosensors, you name it. And so if you think about nanomaterials, you're really going to use a very small amount. So you can, I mean, if you think about the possibilities, it's almost endless. For us, we are very focused on generating revenue in the near term. And while we can do everything, we are very focused currently on composites and coatings. But to go back to your previous comment on kind of the ages of man, if we think about how much impact, for example, silicon had on computing and really what has generated most of modern technology, we were really going for those conductivity gains. So graphene actually has superior conductivity, but we're also bringing with it mechanical benefits, which means for most systems, I mean, we're able to exploit far more traits. And The interesting thing with nanomaterials is you can kind of layer on these traits. So we're going to have materials in the future that currently we can't really imagine. So I find that very, very exciting to kind of build these new materials that we'll be using in our emerging technologies.
Mhm. So you'll be able to layer different layers of one atom thick carbon material to get the results or get the properties that you're looking for to sort of tailor it to whatever the needs are in industry.
Right.
All right. Bob, have you any comments? I know you've thought a lot about it. You really like this story a lot. What are your thoughts so far? What she's saying?
Well, here's what's interesting, and it's absolutely accurate. This is a giant game changer. And let me point something out that we're aware of, but we don't think about. There was an invention in 1949 behind the really great music of the 50s and 60s. Can you think of what it was?
Silicon? What? I'm not sure.
Close.
I'm not sure.
Kjirstin would know.
What is silicone used in?
Computers.
Chips.
Chips.
This, I think, was
Computer chips.
predating chips. So what?
Well,
you
strange enough, the transistor.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, 3 scientists invented the transistor in 1949. Now, here's my issue and here's my question. The music of the 50s and 60s was totally different than anything before and after. It was really the golden age of music. And the reason for it was transistors. And if you go back to, say, 1957 or 1958, a 6-transistor radio was $20. Gold was $35 an ounce, but a 6-transistor radio cost more than half an ounce of gold. So you got something that's going to take a few years to actually have an impact. But I think that what you got is going to have a similar impact to that of the transistor. And basically, a computer chip is nothing but billions of transistors. Okay. So the magnitude of what you've got is absolutely incredible. I love the story of how you invented your product, okay, because it was an accident. And I actually make jewelry, and I'm very familiar with the use of acetylene, because if you burn acetylene and you don't have the right quantity of oxygen, you have this carbon black, okay? So I can make graphene too, but in little tiny quantities. So my question, I'll finally get around to it, is what is it going to take to make the world aware of what you've got? When do we go from the theory into the practical?
Very good question.
Well, for one moment to clarify, the brilliant Dr. Sorensen is the inventor. I'm just the CEO. But moving on from that, I do believe that really this year is our inflection point. I really believe that the next 12 months, as I think is not shocking to our audience, most of the movement that we see is defense related. There are a lot of technologies that we can positively improve, and there is a lot of money behind a lot of these developments, and there's a lot of motivation to really commercialize some of these advancements. And I think apart from that, you know, when we're looking at sustainability benefits, when we're looking at cancer detection, there's a company that we've been working with called Hawkeye Biomedical that our viewers can look into, that was published in Nature. We did have to take a step back. We did have a change in management in March of 24 that put me in as CEO. So I do have a slightly different strategy than previous management. And because we're looking at 18-month development cycles, we're just nearing that end where we're going to walk into, you know, because it goes from laboratory trials to industrial trials and then to contract negotiation. And we're just entering that contract negotiation phase effectively now and then through the beginning of 2026, when a lot of these are going to come to completion. So I do believe that with these announcements, the stock should respond quite positively, I do believe. And again, we have had a lot of interest from a lot of parties, some government affiliated, some defense related. And I really do think that this is now kind of taking on a life of its own. So we're very, very close.
Okay,
Go ahead,
Kjirstin,
Bob.
are you wearing shoes?
Am I wearing shoes? No, I'm not currently wearing shoes.
Okay, because if you were wearing shoes, I would ask you to take them off because I'm going to hold your feet to the fire.
Please do.
I am a firm believer in buying things primarily because they're cheap. And when I write about stocks, a lot of times I ignore the technical because I'm not interested in the technical. At some price, everything is worth something. You have a $42 million market cap. What should it be?
In my opinion, well, I think, of course, we need to deliver on those contracts, but I firmly believe this company is going to be worth billions.
Yeah.
Okay. When will you start signing contracts?
I think for people to be planning on the larger contracts are going to come in 2026, but we will have a number of smaller wins this year. And again, it's those 18-month development cycles. I've only been CEO for a year, and I'm just entering the end, because at a certain point you can't shorten these cycles. You just have a number of tests that these companies need to do to verify what we have, and we're right about at that point. So in my opinion, this is a very good deal for this company if people are going to be purchasing in the market. And as we start hitting these milestones, 2026 is going to be a very different year for us. We could already start to scale very rapidly. And that's really our whole pitch, is our scalability.
Okay, let me justify the billions figure, because quite bluntly, I think I'm as optimistic or more optimistic than you. What are your margins?
To say conservatively, I would say 70%.
Okay, Jay, I was being really rude and I interrupted. Back to you.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I mean, there's so many questions. I don't know where to go next, but here's the thing. Kjirstin, you mentioned offtake agreements, and that will happen in 2025. In your notes to me, so you really, what in answer to Bob's question, you're really expecting some contract to be signed this year yet, most likely. Not a big one, but something.
We are. Yes, these are companies we've been working with for some time. The really, really large opportunities will likely be in 26, but of course, we've made a number of changes to the team. Things are moving quite quickly for us. So there are some near-term opportunities as well that we're looking at.
Yeah, and offtake agreements, I'm wondering in terms of financing, I know you're planning to ramp up, you're building a factory in Texas, in which you'll have acetylene piped right into your plant. Is that something we're going to hear more about in the near term?
Yes, we are just going back and forth with this large gas supplier on that definitive agreement. So we should have something to announce, and should be able to announce the name of this company as well, I would say within the next 2 to 3 months. And then our aim is to have this facility open by Q1, if not Q2 of next year. And just to reinforce again, I think this is going to be a very, very positive indication to our customers worldwide that we are scalable and we will be able to deliver on these huge, huge amounts of graphene that we are claiming that we can, because a lot of these customers, they're interested in thousands of tons annually. And of course, it goes without saying that would be a gradual ramp up to get to that point, but that is a massive amount of graphene.
And the revenues per ton range, can you give us some sort of a range? I know you've talked about it before, but can you give us some sort of a ballpark range of revenues per ton? And you mentioned 70% operating profit margins, which are that's mind blowing, but
Very healthy.
Very healthy.
So per ton, I will say we are one of the higher end graphene, so it's going to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per ton. Our highest grade is about $800,000 per ton, and that's again very, very conductive, and it has a specific surface area. So it really depends on the customer. We often make graphenes really for the customer based on their specific requirements, and because we're synthetic, we have that ability. So there is some range, but again, if you're looking at the economic potential when we're in the hundreds, if not plus 1,000 tons annual consumption, it's some pretty chunky contracts.
Okay, so that leads to the next question with regard to capex. You're going to be building out something pretty substantial. Can you talk a little bit about capex for this business? Because people are thinking, well, you look at these revenues, there must be a heck of a lot of capital that's got to be raised. You also mentioned offtake agreements. Maybe you're looking at, major companies that can very well help you fund your business with, you provide the product and they pay you, or they provide the money up front and you provide the product. Is that something we might look forward to?
Yes, I would say we are having those discussions. Of course, the larger the company, the longer that might take. But the benefit for us is that this is a very low capex system. So a lot of the components are off the shelf. Of course, we've done a lot of modifications. We also produce some components bespoke internally, but our system, so the next generation system that we have, which is going to be what we're implementing in the Texas facility, which is not really a redesign, it's kind of a reordering. And then, as you mentioned, because we're going to have pipeline acetylene, we just need a modification for the new flow rate. That system, it should range, let's say, between $500,000 and $650,000.
Wow.
So these are not overly expensive pieces. The output of that should be in the order of 25 metric tons annually. And again, the lifetime of these reactors should be over a decade.
So they're larger than the ones you're using now, I guess. The reactor.
Quite a bit larger.
Right. I think I had in mind something like 10 tons or something like that with the previous ones.
The reactors that we use right now with the bulk packs, and a bulk pack is 9 acetylene cylinders kind of roped together. That is, as you mentioned, that has the output of 10 metric tons, and the capex is about $350,000.
You've mentioned that you've had some changes to your board, to your team. Could you talk a little bit about the changes in personnel that's come about as you're planning to build out this business?
Sure. I think this is a good question. I will also add, I had a number of investors reach out with some questions. I think that all things considered, this company was founded in 2017. You get, a certain board for a company of that size, and then you need, for most situations, a slightly different board to be NASDAQ compliant. And that's really what we had in mind. Is our goal is to list on NASDAQ in 2026, and there's a number of really just internal compliance changes that we had to make, mostly with audit expertise, governance expertise, and really just having that big company experience and having that really, really solid board, previous board experience. And that's really the motivation behind the changes. Of course, we thank David Williams and Paul Cox for all of their contributions to date. They've really helped us to get the company to this point. And I think that, again, having these changes really makes us a much stronger board and a much stronger company, really, to have that compliance ready for NASDAQ. And I will also add that even though I'm currently chair, it is not my aim to stay chair. This is just to stabilize the company while we make these changes. As we look to NASDAQ, we'll have an independent chair.
Okay. All right. Bob, any thoughts?
Yeah, I do. You're on the C exchange in Canada right now, and I'm not a giant fan of the C exchange. How difficult or how expensive would it be to move to the TSX?
So it's actually not that difficult and not that expensive. This comes down to a conversation on, is it worth moving to the TSX while we also move to NASDAQ, because we could stay listed on the CSE and then slowly re-domicile fully to the US. And this is a conversation that I think everyone is going to have slightly different opinions on. I would say internally we're relatively open, but I would remind our audience that there are a number of benefits that we can receive if we are fully moved over to the US. We're going to reduce arbitrage. I think obviously NASDAQ on its own is a very, very strong exchange. And I do think that some of the parties that we are speaking to would be very interested to have this fully and completely in American technology.
I agree with that, but it would be very quick and very cheap to go to the TSX. I just don't like the C exchange, and there's a lot of investors who don't. So you could take baby steps and get to the TSX. I fully approve of the NASDAQ, but that costs a lot of money, requires a lot of changes, and it takes time.
Mm-hmm.
It does take a minimum, I would say, of 6 months. We do have some benefits being a foreign issuer that we can maintain basically our Canadian compliance requirements. We can use our Canadian audit firm. And so it is a lower financial requirement and a lower lift. But then, of course, once we fully re-domicile, we have to move to GAAP and we need to do all the rest. And that can come at a pretty high cost. So I don't disagree.
But you will need to be in both Canada and the US.
For a time, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, no, forever.
Well, we don't have to be.
Anything that you do, you should try to keep it simple and preferably cheap. And I like the TSX, and I'm looking at it from the natural resource field.
Yeah.
The NASDAQ's not big on natural resources. Okay, you're going to build your own market. I have no question about that. I have no question about your technical success or your management success. But all of your audience right now is based on Canadian investors, and it's very difficult to buy the American stock. So moving to the TSX, in my opinion, would be a good move. And I'm not saying it was an end goal, but it's an intermediate goal.
Yeah, I do appreciate that perspective. And I think a lot of our Canadian audience would likely agree with you.
All right, so just a couple of questions yet, Kjirstin. You work a lot with the University of Manchester and their scientific group there, the GEEK. I forget what the acronym stands for, but when you and I met recently, you mentioned also that there could be some sort of a GEEK group that's formed in the United States or in Canada, the United States probably,
Yes.
and that may be somewhat maybe more attached to military applications. Do I have that right?
That's correct. So these are early stage conversations. I would say that they've likely been researching us for more than a year. That sounds like it's moving quite quickly. I can't comment too much today. I don't know where the location would be, but I do think that Hydrograph is likely to be a very big focus. And this goes back to some of the conversations that Bob and I were just having on moving most of the company really to the US, which I think does come with a number of benefits.
You mentioned that you have some 60 companies that you've been talking to, and maybe just mention how you narrow that down. Where is your focus? It reminds me a little bit of some of the mining companies that I have that have endless numbers of targets to shoot at. Somehow they got to narrow it down and prioritize those targets. So how are you deciding which companies to spend the most time with as you bring them along to purchase your products?
So this is a good question. And just to speak a little bit more, when we're defining, I think it's now 65 plus, but these are companies that are actively purchasing, either samples or larger amounts of graphene. This does not always include the GEEK projects because there are a number of companies that work with us through the GEEK. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, we don't always have clarity on really what the volumes would be or what the economic opportunity would be, because the GEEC has confidentiality agreements with these companies, and we have to wait till the project completes, and then we're opened up to their corporate team, and then we can have those discussions. So our pipeline is not including a lot of the opportunities that we are expecting to see come through. And some of these are just, I would say probably half of them, they just buy graphene, we send it to them, we have some communication, but it doesn't mean that all of them are sharing a lot of information. I would say we really then prioritize 10 to 15 large opportunities that we see the most economic potential in. And that's where we, of course, put the most effort in. And we have ongoing discussions with their team. And it goes without saying, they need to agree with this. Some companies are always going to be more secretive and will just do the work and then they report back. Some share a lot of information. So it's very dependent really on what type of relationship. But of course, in our mind, because there is a little bit of a learning curve with using graphene, we like to have as much communication with these companies as possible. And to your previous point, we're a relatively small company, so we do need to make sure that we focus really on the biggest benefit to Hydrograph there with our time and energy.
So time and I guess margins and so forth, because there will be some variation in margins, as you pointed out before. There's some companies where the value added is much greater than with others. Bob, have you got any more thoughts or questions?
Okay, where do you stand for money? What kind of shape are you in?
We're not bad for money. We do have about 2 million US in the bank. We also have, and now I'm switching currencies, to 3.3 million Canadian in warrants that are set to expire at the end of September. So let's call that 2.5 US, give or take. With that, we are comfortable, but also everyone is, I'm sure, aware that we can scale and accomplish more faster with additional funds. So I would say that, especially if it's strategic money or if we have very, very clean terms, I don't really want to use warrants going forward. We could be interested, but again, we're in a very healthy position. We're able to do everything that we want to do. We also want to start hitting some of these commercial milestones that I've mentioned. And again, we would be targeting NASDAQ in 2026, and that would coincide with another round of funding.
Okay, how many warrants and what price and when exactly do they expire?
Yeah, are they in the money? I guess that's the question I would have.
They are in the money.
Exactly.
They are in the money, priced at 18 cents. And again, the dollar value, I have to look up the number of warrants that is, but we have more than 50 million currently outstanding, overwhelmingly in the money. And so this tranche is worth a total of 3.3 million Canadian.
Yeah, 18 cents Canadian. It's 16 cents down here, but it's 18 cents Canadian.
Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah.
Healthily in the money, I think.
Yes.
Kjirstin, anything else you'd like to share with us that we haven't touched on? I mean, lots of notes you've sent me, and I think you pretty much generally covered them all. Mm-hmm. I guess I would like to know what catalysts then investors should be looking at, because if things really come to fruition as soon as you suggest they might, you might not want to wait too long to check this story out. But what catalysts should we be looking for? Should investors be aware of?
Right. So I think, we've really gone through a number of changes this past year. After the change in management, we've made a number of changes to the team, to the board. And I would say now, current day, we're in a very, very healthy place where things are now moving rapidly. I think with the interest that we've had from the US government, from the interest that we've had from customers, we are expecting, as mentioned, a couple of near-term opportunities. We should have a number of supply agreements out this year. Of course, also a number of purchase orders and really technical developments. And 2026 is going to be very exciting. And I'm hoping we can start to really get some momentum going, of course, in advance of NASDAQ.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank both of you. Kjirstin, thank you so much for spending your valuable time. Bob, the same. Thank you for adding your color and your imagination. It's always fun to have you on with me. So I guess we're going to watch very carefully, and I hope we can talk to you again, Kjirstin, as you have that first big announcement. I hope you'll give us a chance to have you on Turning Hard Times into Good Times. So thank you. Thank you very much. Well, that's it for today, folks. Later this week, I'm going to be interviewing the CEO of what I think is a ridiculously undervalued gold exploration story. So keep an eye on your inbox at Substack. And that's it. Until then, goodbye and God's blessings to you.